Доброе утро, уважаемые.
Good morning, dear colleagues. We're beginning our press conference dedicated to the 10th Global Forum of the Alliance for Financial Inclusion. It will be presided by the Dr. Alfred Hannig, the CEO of the AFI and Governor of the Central Bank of Russia, Ms. Nabiullina. I'll give the word to Dr. Hannig.
Доброе утро, everyone. It's a pleasure for us to be here in Sochi in Russia, where we are going to hold our 10th AFI Global Policy Forum, which is the annual flagship event on financial inclusion. We are very happy to have the opportunity to be hosted by the Central Bank of Russia, who is one of the first members of AFI and has been with us on this journey for a very long time. At the moment, we count 107 member institutions from 93 countries. The most recent member who joined AFI is actually from this region, is Central Bank of Uzbekistan. So our members are usually financial regulators who get engaged in the network into peer learning and mutual knowledge sharing to generate better policies and regulations to increase access, usage, and quality of financial services for unbanked people. This is basically the purpose what AFI is doing. And in our 10-year journey, we have seen quite a lot of progress. We can share with you, and you will also find it in the exhibition. That during the time of AFI, in the last 10 years, the members of AFI have issued and implemented 384 policy reforms which are financial inclusion related. These covers regulations on digital financial services, for example. Some countries have issued regulatory frameworks on electronic money issuance, for example. Other countries have launched national financial education campaigns, and others even have put in place frameworks for measuring financial inclusion and informing policy making on the domestic level. So there are quite a number of achievements in this area, and we are also happy to report when we count the changes and we put them into relation with the current data that is available through the Global Findex, and we also look at the number of AFI members who are counted in the Global Findex of the World Bank, and in addition also ask the member how they see the attribution of what AFI is doing for the members, which is around 60%. So members are telling us that 60% of their reforms are influenced by AFI work. And if you combine these three indicators, we arrive at a number of 634 million adults worldwide who have actually gotten access to finance as a result of AFI activities. This is the way we are trying to conduct this analysis. So this week we are going to see the 10th GPF in collaboration with the Central Bank. We are going to see two main deliverables from this Global Policy Forum. One is the Sochi Accord on FinTech for Financial Inclusion, which is a framework that will advise AFI members to use financial technology to improve on financial inclusion. And the second one is the launch of the regional initiative on financial inclusion in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, which is an initiative which is to be launched during this event. I want to stop. Thank you very much for your interest and give back the floor to the chair. Thank you.
Большое спасибо, доктор Hannig.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hannig. I give the floor to Ms. Nabiullina. Good afternoon. We are very happy to welcome here in Sochi the 10th Global Forum of the Alliance for Financial Inclusion. The Alliance unites regulators from 92 countries, and for Russia, it is a very important platform for discussion of issues related to one of the priorities of our activity, i.e. financial inclusion, availability of services to population, to business, consumer protection in the financial markets, and financial awareness. Participation in the Alliance gives us the possibility to participate in the exchange of knowledge within the sector of financial services, we can take into account the different countries' experience. We deem it quite symbolic that this year, when we first approved a national strategy to increase financial inclusion, Russia is hosting the Alliance Forum. You know the priorities of our strategy. We discussed them with the market participants. Those are increasing the level of availability and quality of financial services for consumers in sparsely populated areas, faraway areas. Also equal access to for people with disabilities, and availability and security of financial services for weakly protected social groups. This is great work that is done by the central bank. We coordinate our efforts with the ministries, government, regional authorities, and market participants. And of course, this work will only benefit from the exchange of experience with countries that solve similar issues, and especially from the cooperation with countries that have close economic ties with Russia. So we are very happy. We discussed in the morning the launch of the regional initiative of the AFI for financial inclusion for countries of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, which we, together with the leadership of the Central National Banks of Armenia, Belarus, Uzbekistan, and the Mongolian Financial Regulatory Commission, have approved today. And within the implementation of the regional initiative, we plan not only to exchange best practices, but also to harmonize approaches to increasing financial inclusion and consumer protection. Today, we discussed and approved priorities of this initiative. The first is the remittance regional system and cross-border transaction and remittance. You know that between many countries that joined this initiative, the cross-border transmittance is quite developed. It also includes the creation of regional interoperable regional systems, improving the KYC procedures, which provides the safety of these remittances. You know, the services of distance identification is being developed in Russia, so it's important for us to pay attention to this also. It also includes the unified guidelines for mutually informing regulators from the region on possible consumer protection issues, because in these cross-border transactions, sometimes issues arise that have to do with the consumer protection issues. There have to be some mechanisms, and there has to be regulation for this. The second priority is market conduct regulation and supervision. It's a very important topic for Russia. The central bank is right now developing the area related to conduct regulation and supervision, including the combating the malpractice in the market, and it has to be adapted to the cross-border transactions and distant financial services. Third priority is development of regional guidelines for financial education and impact measurement. This will include development of metrics of competences, considering the region-specific and exchange of experience on the developing national strategy for financial education. Each country develops, designs such strategies. We have similar problems, so experience of each other is quite beneficial. And the fourth priority is design of the financial education programs, considering the behavior aspects. It includes the context of the economy, and it unifies the approaches to information disclosure and all the financial services. It's an important area for Russia when financial consumers have to be fully informed on the specifics, on risks, of the financial services and products. Standardization of loan contracts is also important for Russia. We lead, we do a lot of work in this, and also the rural financial education. Those are 4 priorities. They are interesting for all countries. We discussed them, we reached consensus in choosing them, and we see that they are aligned with the agenda of all the countries, including Russia. Within this regional initiative, we will work closely on increasing financial inclusion, availability of services to population, raising the quality. We will protect the population rights on the financial market, and we will increase financial awareness. Thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, now it's time for a Q&A session. All right, so raise your hands, please. Ms. Yelena Zabrova, Russia Today. Good afternoon, Ms. Nabiullina. I have 2 questions. A question for each of you.
The main outcomes expected from this global forum.
Ms. Nabiullina, you've talked a lot about promoting financial inclusion, and these issues are directly related to financial awareness and literacy. Earlier, you proposed to make Russia the platform for Financial Literacy Association. So please, is this issue discussed right now? What is the progress on it? Are there any recommendations, proposals on creating such an association for financial literacy? Thanks a lot.
On the question related to the major outcomes, as I mentioned, it will be the Sochi Accord on FinTech for Financial Inclusion. This will be the networks, the AFI networks commitment towards driving forward financial technologies and of course enabling regulators to keep the risks in check. We all know that financial technologies come with risks which are actually going beyond prudential risks. We are, especially through the introduction of these new technologies, seeing new risks of technology, which have a lot to do with usage of big data, which has a lot to do with delivery of digital credit or credit through digital channels. So in other words, we are faced with new risks which require effective market conduct regulations and supervision mechanisms, and the accord is meant to enable countries to learn from each other to fully reap the benefits of technological advances through FinTech for financial inclusion. So that's one of the outcomes. The other outcome, Governor has just talked about in more detail. This is the launch of the regional initiative for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. I think you got the 4 elements of this important initiative. This is the 5th regional initiative that AFI is entertaining. We have already seen initiatives in other regions. Now we have seen a lot of demand from our member needs assessment from the countries in this region to also create their own platform for mutual learning and knowledge sharing, which at the same time will connect to the global knowledge exchange of what the network is offering. I should say that thirdly, we will also see new commitments from members, country commitments on financial inclusion. Now these commitments are ranging from digital financial services provision towards small and medium enterprise finance, but also working on issues related to global standards. But this year we are particularly encouraging commitments towards financial inclusion efforts that can close the existing gender gap in financial inclusion. Now we know that in Russia and in other Eastern European countries, perhaps the gender gap is less of an issue, but in the rest of the world, we still see a very stubborn gender gap, meaning that there are by far more women who have no access to finance than men. And of course, AFI would like to help to close this gap. So we will see more country commitments on this. The other one, which I need to mention, is an area where we also see new commitments. This is pretty new, but very relevant to all of us. And this has to do with the effects of climate change on financial inclusion. So we want to encourage countries to implement policy frameworks that would enable sustainable financial inclusion. We start to call it green financial inclusion, which is actually addressing two issues. One is the issue of resilience. In many countries, financial inclusion is a very important means actually to protect themselves against consequences, for example, of climate risks or climate catastrophes. So resilience is one of them. The other one is, of course, green finance, which is more looking into the investment side. So this is also what we are trying to encourage, commitments towards gender gap reduction and dealing with the risks of climate change through financial inclusion. Thank you.
Okay, regarding the Financial Literacy Association, the Bank of Russia has, this was an initiative of communities of non-governmental organizations which we have supported. Let me remind you, the basic idea was to create a tool that would provide a platform for private initiatives, for social initiatives that would help financial literacy, which could be supported and scaled up further on. And we should it was also supposed to raise the awareness of financial literacy, support various quizzes, organizations, forums, and first and foremost with an active participation of non-governmental organizations, private initiatives. And we also discussed an issue of this association being a coordinator for financial literacy volunteers, which is quite an active, rapidly developing movement in Russia. There are many volunteers, and actually every year we conduct events in this sphere. And the association's potential participants are first and foremost various market members associations, possibly some very important market members with an absolutely clear reputation who are interested in the systemic development of the market. And right now there are quite active consultations, deliberations regarding in which exact format we could create this association. The deliberations are still ongoing, but I can assure you that probably quite soon, later this year or next year, the association could be launched. We see great interest in this from the market participants, and the project seems to be in demand. So, colleagues, Ms. Margarita Shpilevska, TASS, good morning. I would ask Mr. Hannig a question in Russian. Mr. Hannig, I'd like to hear your assessment of how the financial inclusion situation has evolved in Russia over the recent years. Ms. Nabiullina, during your meeting with the president, you said that the central bank would focus on the financial inclusion for sparsely populated areas and remote. What are the KPIs and the targets for this program? Thank you.
Viewpoint, I can say that we have, of course, been following very closely on the developments in this country. We have seen Central Bank of Russia being very engaged in many of the working groups and also some of the knowledge-sharing activities. I think that the two more outstanding progress elements that I would mention at this stage is one, I think Russia moved forward, especially on agency banking regulation a couple of years ago. That was also a result of intense engagement with countries that have already seen progress in this area. So I think you established a system of banking agents that would allow more people to get access to finance. I think this regulation was a result of the work of the engagement in AFI, and this was also shared, of course, as a knowledge with others, as a good example of how things can go. I think the other very important step that Russia has made that we have seen, especially during the last year, is the launch of the National Financial Inclusion Strategy. That has also been a subject of a peer review with other members in the AFI network, and of course we are following on these developments. In general, I think what we do see is Russia for us is a very important partner when it comes, as I said before, looking into how we deal with the risks of technology. Everyone is very aware of these risks, but I think especially the financial awareness seems to be an issue that is not only driving policymakers and regulators and the population in this country, but also in many other countries. So we're looking forward also to monitoring the progress in this country and also engaging Russian authorities and regulators into discussion with others. This is a very relevant issue, and I do see that Russia has come quite far. I was in the position to also participate in the International Financial Congress in St. Petersburg this year, where we heard about the progress in the area of financial education programs, financial awareness, and so forth. So we are very aware that Russia has made quite a bit of progress in this area. Thank you very much.
The question concerning providing financial inclusion for sparsely located, populated areas is one of the priorities of the Bank of Russia strategy on the increasing financial inclusion. This is really the priority. In fact, we have problems that are not yet solved. They are quite significant. For example, some figures, 95% of the urban areas of cities and the villages, they have trade organizations in them. 95% of rural areas, they don't have trade organizations, offices. So it really shows how topical and urgent this issue is, how many people live in the sparsely populated areas, and how are we going to act. First of all, we will develop the modern technologies, the distance financial services. They can significantly increase financial inclusion. And the second is to stimulate the enlargement of the system and the representativeness of these financial services there. And it goes along with the development of financial technologies. Why? Because right now, entities that have banking accounts, 92 of the banking accounts can be managed via internet distance. And 45% of consumers use this. There is so-called mental inclusion, mental availability of the services. Not everybody is ready to make use of these services, even though they have the technological opportunity and possibilities. So increasing financial awareness and providing the safety and security of the services, they go alone. But as long as this mental availability is not high, we need to develop alternative and new technologies for the financial services and in terms of physical representativity. And we have reduced the requirements to the credit organizations offices that provide base services such as mobile offices that some banks have. The development of the points of provision of financial services in the remote areas. For example, have Post Bank, but there are other examples that have services of withdrawal of cash. It's all included in our strategy. There are specific tasks. We do the ongoing monitoring and will publish the reviews of how we develop financial inclusion, and will demonstrate the indicators. We will improve this mechanism, including using the experience of AFI and other countries. They have the mechanism for measurements, and we discussed that it will be great if we could share the approaches which will allow us to develop inter-country comparability in this issue. Colleagues, Maxim Yevyanov from Kuban 24. Good afternoon. The question for Ms. Nabiullina: the increasing of the financial awareness of financial services availability, and it has some risks for the consumers. So what do you think are the main mechanisms of protection? What are the main relevant and which will be developed soon. It's a very correct question. The financial inclusion, especially when financial services are used by the population which don't have high level of financial literacy, it can lead to risks. And the regulator task is to protect the rights of citizens during their use of the financial services. We have two directions. The first is restoring the violated rights. If the rights were violated, the rights that are stipulated in legislation, not always people are aware of them. It's important to restore them. For this, we have a framework for complaint consideration. We've improved it considerably, and we've put a lot of effort to make sure that this framework would be efficient mechanism for the regulator to react to these complaints concerning the rights violation. The share of these complaints is increasing, and we're dealing with them. The second priority, I would like to lay focus on it. It's the appearance of new institute of financial ombudsman. Recently, we have a new law that has come into its effect. We are going to appoint a financial ombudsman, Mr. Voronin. And we think that this will become one of the most important institutions for restoration of rights of the population. Another area is regulation and supervision. We introduce changes into supervision. We develop behavioral supervision, the rules and regulations for sale of products and services. Here we have our own priorities. First of all, from the perspective of where we see the most problems, those are the mortgage loans. We have approved legislation that introduce strict requirements to informing the population. The standards for mortgage loans, we will develop them, and we are also discussing the option that the borrower has to have the right of loan restructurization in case there are some problems. They have such a rule on large loans, but we are still discussing this topic. This framework for regulation of qualified and non-qualified investors, we've discussed it a lot of times. Complex products, risk products, they should be available for qualified investors. There should be no malafide sale of products to people who are not aware about the risks. Of course, the key issue for us is the forced sale of loans. This is of insurance. It's quite a common topic. It's discussed on the insurance market, but no tasks are solved. It's also the area of the Bank of Russia as the regulator. Please, another question, Anastasia. Anastasia Saprikina, RIA Novosti. Ms. Nabiullina, you mentioned the financial ombudsman. What do you think, how many people will be able to use this service? And is there the memorandum, the mutual understanding with the market participants? Well, legislation stipulates that the financial ombudsman will be developing step by step, and it will gradually cover different areas. First of all, those are the insurance, the MLDP insurance, and the market participants will be able to voluntarily agree to these services. We will develop the service, and it's important for us to develop the instruments for this. We think that a lot of cases can be covered by this service. There are criteria up to 500 rubles of the service of the complaints of the population will be the indicator of how efficient the work of the service will be. And we will inform you and report to you on the work of this service. And
Anna Baraulina, Bloomberg.
Ms. Baraulina, Bloomberg. Thanks. Question one is for both speakers. I'd like to know if you have discussed the regulation of cryptocurrencies, digital currencies, because as far as I know, it also has a lot to do with financial inclusion globally. And secondly, I'd like to know, well, it's a question to Ms. Nabiullina, regarding the fintech projects that are supposed to increase financial inclusion. There is a project for fast payment system, and I was to ask whether the banks will be obliged to participate or whether it will be voluntary, whether they could opt out of participating in this system.
Currently, the upcoming work stream on fintech for financial inclusion is also including a sub-work stream on cryptocurrency regulation. As you are very well aware from the general discussion, here we are quite at the beginning, especially when it comes to the relationship with financial inclusion. So we are going to see the progress here in the next year. It is too early to share with you any results because this is just now picking up in the network.
I think that the topic of digital currencies, digital technology will be discussed in the coming days during our forum. And the position of the Bank of Russia is well known. It hasn't changed yet. We see a lot of benefit in the new financial technology underlying the digital currencies. And even though these technologies are probably in their infant stages, we have a lot of questions regarding how they're related to in the drug economy and so on. But we see a lot of risks in the further spread of digital currencies, especially when it comes to protecting the rights of consumers. I believe that the risks are quite high, and the risks of using such systems for money laundering are also present. And therefore, we are very cautious when it comes to digital currencies. And the second question was regarding the fast payment system. It's one of the projects that we're working on in collaboration with the market participants, and it aims to make it easier for citizens to access the payment systems, make it cheaper, easier to use. And we see that these P2P payments are very well developed in Russia. It's in demand, and the exact demand for it will depend on how many participants will be able to draw in. So, as of now, we're discussing whether we should make it obligatory for the market participants or whether the banks would be able to opt out. Well, of course, there are advantages and disadvantages to voluntary basis, but to make it really work, we need to make sure that there are as many participants as possible. So it's still under discussion, but we think it should be voluntary. The market participants should be able to opt out, but it's a work in progress. Ms. Romankova, Vegetar Car. Thanks. So I have a question to Mr. Hannig. What are the short-term plans for 5-10 years of AFI in general?
The medium-term plans for AFI are actually laid out in our medium-term strategy. So we are following 3 pillars. The first pillar is all around making the network a content-driven organization, which actually means that we are brokering a lot of knowledge. Now the network, I think, has matured, and we are now in the position also to provide input on secured knowledge on solutions that have worked, which also will enable the network to in future issue guidance, regulatory guidance for member institutions who are looking for exactly this guidance. This actually comes from the current situation that we're observing, that the global standard setting bodies are of course providing regulatory guidance, but particularly in the area of financial inclusion, we still do see gaps in this guidance. This comes especially to the forefront when we look at the whole application of the principle of the proportionality. So the traditional standard setting bodies up to now have not taken this task to provide additional guidance on how the principle of proportionality can be applied by the countries. But we have many countries in the network, such as the Philippines, Mexico, East African countries like Kenya, who have very solid experience on, for example, how to deal with situations where a small customer doesn't even have a physical address. So how do you deal with this situation? And there are now ways, for example, of tiered KYC, eKYC that can actually help to solve this problem. And regulatory guidance around these principles is not yet available. So that's where AFI wants to step up, of course, and also to provide such kind of guidance. So that's number one. Number two is we have engaged so many members in learning activities. When you see the exhibition outside, you can see the numbers. And this has enabled countries to implement policy reforms, quite a number. Now, after all the learning that has taken place and the exchanges that have taken place, now countries are moving forward towards implementation. So the second priority for the next 5 years is to support country in terms of in-country implementation, which we do through the provision of small funding to countries. They can do demand-side surveys, they can engage technical advice to move forward, they can participate in international exchanges, they can even get access to knowledge on how to communicate national financial inclusion strategies, how to coordinate these activities on the national level. So all this will be supported on the implementation. And the third priority is we will still continue to raise our voice globally, particularly with regards to the G20, where AFI is an implementing partner of the Financial Inclusion Initiative, but also, of course, we will also raise the voices of our members vis-à-vis the standard-setting bodies. And here, very important examples are, for example, what are the consequences of Basel II, Basel III, how does this affect financial inclusion, and are the standard-setting bodies aware of unintended consequences of these regulations? The other one is, of course, on the Financial Stability Board. We see issues of de-risking that are quite relevant in some countries. So in other words, how can we bring these voices of countries who are suffering most from these issues into the discussion with the standard-setting bodies? So these are some of the examples. So 3 priorities, which is content, guidance, second, implementation, third one on global presence. In the long run, AFI, of course, also wants to become a financially sustainable organization. So we are going to generate additional income streams. Many of our services are now also going to be attractive for institutions or even individuals who are not members of AFI. So we are thinking of ways to reaching out to those ones who are in need of this knowledge, but of course that will be provided against the cost because all the other members are also providing the fees. So we are seeing this also as an opportunity to make the institution financially sustainable. Thank you.
Colleagues, so Banki.ru. My first question is from Mr. Hannig. Well, you mentioned Russia's progress in financial technology. Could you evaluate how far Russia has advanced in remote banking as compared to other countries? And the second question is to Ms. Nabiullina. Wouldn't biometrics end up being too expensive for banks? Because even now banks complain about the skyrocketing costs of implementing the biometrics system.
Well, first of all, I should say AFI is not a compliance-driven body, and we are also hesitant to do rating of our members in terms of international comparison. So we do normally not provide this information that we go, data by data. But we, of course, we give members the opportunity to access the data so that they can compare themselves. Having said that, I mean, we are all aware that Russia has come quite far in terms of financial inclusion when we look at access levels. So you are, I think, in a very good situation when you see globally. We still see 1.7 billion people without access to formal banking. I think in Russia you were almost able to reduce this margin, so the number of unbanked has gone down. But of course, as Governor also alluded to, now we we see challenges, especially on the quality side. So how can we actually maintain sustainable financial inclusion over time? And I think there Russia is in a very good position because technological advances are moving forward very fast in this country. We are aware of the risks. We are very interested in the discussions that Russia is leading at the moment, and of course also want to feed back the knowledge into the network. I do believe that Russia in this area is quite advanced compared to some other regions who are just now starting to in fact digest what technology can offer. But of course this is a task which will take long. This is nothing that we can expect to solve overnight. We do believe, and this is one of the lessons from the financial crisis that happened also exactly 10 years ago when AFI was created, which is actually almost an irony of history, when we were created at a time when too much inclusion actually led to a crisis. I think we could see that it is very important over time to make efforts to keep people in the system. If we go for too simple solutions, we risk that people will drop off the system, and we will again have a situation of financial exclusion. So I think the approach which is taken, which is a cautious one, to move forward gradually, step by step, and especially to work on the market conduct regulations, seems to be appropriate from the network's point of view. And I think Russia is very well positioned to take a leading role in this discussion. Thank you.
Спасибо.
As for remote authentication and biometric information, this is the future. Without the remote authentication and secure remote authentication connected with the collection of biometric information, many financial services and financial institutions will face challenges in development because consumers don't want to go to the office for each service each time. They want to manage their finance using new technologies, and so the remote authentication is being developed. And I think that the technology for collection will be getting cheaper. We are following closely this process. Yes, some banks have trouble, and we will move the institutions that will be developing these services, and the rest of the financial institutions will have to make it a priority if they want to compete for the consumers, because this is the wish and the need of the consumers. And by the way, today we are discussing financial inclusion, and you know, one of our priorities, we have a special working group of financial inclusion for people with disabilities, and the disabled are very active in consuming the financial services in terms of the banking accounts and so on. And they also want a good framework for remote authentication and collection of biometric information. So right now we are looking into the collection of biometrics concerning the people that have disabilities with speech and hearing, for them to be able to be included into the financial services, including the remote authentication and biometrics collection. This project was launched this year. It is evolving, and we are following the costs of the financial institutions, and we're trying to figure out how to help them, but there is no alternative. It has to develop. Okay, Interfax, and this will be the last question. My question is for Ms. Nabiullina about the financial inclusion, but not of the services, but resources. Many analysts are expecting waiting for your signal. So let's not make them wait any longer. What will be the decision of the Board of Directors meeting? It will have to do with the financial inclusion and financial stability. Do you see any improvements in the financial stability, and how do you assess the foreign exchange market situation that we saw in August? Thank you. Yes, next week there will be the Board of the Directors meeting, and they will make a decision in terms of key rates. And right now, I'm not ready to talk about this decision because there will be some discussion. I can mention some logic for the decision making. It has to do with your second question. We see high volatility on financial markets, not only in Russia. And it has to do with the external factors, first of all, including the expectations of the normalization of the policy of emerging markets, some of them, and the detected problems inside the countries with the emerging markets. So investors are assessing the foreign exchange risks concerning these markets, and it impacts the financial market situation. Of course, we will take it into account in our decision making. Right now, we see that the inflation is coming back to our target a bit faster than we forecasted earlier. First of all, due to external factors, including exchange rate dynamics. Our inflation expectations have grown a bit, but not significantly. We will take it into account as well. And right now, there are not so many factors, if there are any, indicating the decrease of the key rate. There are some factors for keeping this rate, and some factors that indicate the possible increase of the key rate. We will assess all the risks because we see that the main risks are temporary. And if they're not translated into the inflation expectations growth, so the policy can be easing slower than we thought it to. Once again, there are changes in external markets, and external factors will be the topic for discussion on the board meeting. Colleagues, we've reached the end. I would like to ask our speakers if you want to say a few words to conclude. If there is something else you want to say.
Well, I just want to be clear that when we talk about the risk of technology, we see opportunities. At the same time, of course, we need to apply caution in terms of moving forward. And I think the magnitude of these technological changes are something that sometimes I would say that the human mind is not even ready to capture. So I think striking the right balance between having an educated approach to move forward without stifling the innovation is very important. I'll give you this example. I mean, we all talk about artificial intelligence. And that there are also risks. For example, when you look at China, which is also in the AFI network, is one of the leading countries in terms of digitization of financial services. I was very struck when I heard that one of the leading person-to-person money transfer platforms is handling 200,000 transactions per second. Yeah, per second. I think that explains, and these are all small customers who normally don't have a bank account. So I'm just saying this comes, of course, with risks in terms of what is going to happen with this information, what is going to happen with this data. At the same time, we don't want to lose these people from the financial system, so to speak. So I think we need to find very educated approaches to deal with this in a constructive way without, as we say, spilling the child with the bath. So in other words, it is very important to continue on this path. I think the Sochi Accord for financial inclusion is a good way to move forward, to keep the risks in check, at the same time exploiting and reaping the benefits of financial technology. Thank you very much for your interest.
To conclude, I would like to say also that we are happy to welcome the 10th forum of the AFI here in Russia, and to once again say that the topics that are considered by the AFI are one of the priorities of the Bank of Russia policy. The consumer protection, financial awareness are all the priorities of the central bank policy. Thank you. Colleagues, thank you very much.